Welcome, everyone. My name is Krista Van Hove. I am a campus planner at Stanford University and the outgoing president of the Northern California ASLA chapter. Joining me today, I have Carrie Cow from Keller Mitchell and your ASLA NCC chapter secretary, and Laura Luer, our executive director, who does all the hard work to keep you all informed. On behalf of the chapter, thank you for joining Lunch with Leaders, Industry Icons with April Phillips. I have a couple of quick announcements today before we get started. We will be hosting the President's Reception in person next month, so please save the date for Thursday, December 9th in the evening. Registration will go out tomorrow, so please sign up early. We have limited numbers of tickets this year, and it's been 2 years since we've had our event in person, and we'll be back at the same location as before in Oakland at Rosenblum Cellars. You won't want to miss it, so remember December 9th. And our last Lunch with Leaders of the year will be on December 1st with David Walker. Thank you to all of you for tuning in this past year. If you missed any of our lectures, you can visit aslancc.org for the recordings. And our last announcement is we will be continuing this series into next year. Our lectures committee is working hard to bring you next year's lineup, so stay tuned for that. And just a couple of quick tips before we get started. If you're comfortable, please turn on your camera. We love seeing everyone. This helps give April the sense of a live audience. And we will also have Q&A at the end of the lecture, so please utilize the chat function to submit any questions during the presentation. Now I would like to welcome today's guest, April Phillips. Not only is she an ASLA fellow and landscape architect, she is a thought leader, an artist, and author. As founder of April Phillips Design Works, her firm focuses on the fusion of nature, art, and technology in urban environments. April is a national leader in both research and practice associated with urban agriculture, sustainable sites, and an integrated design approach. She is the author of Designing Urban Agriculture and has contributed to ASLA's Sustainable Landscapes animation series, The Edible City. A passionate advocate on climate resiliency, April is also a member of Al Gore's Climate Reality Corps and a certified climate reality leader. She frequently speaks on the link between sustainable development change, climate change, and building resilient communities. April, we're so grateful to have you with us today. April is also a former chapter trustee and president and has spent many years volunteering to serve all of you to make membership meaningful. People like April who serve selflessly and passionately are rare to find. We are very fortunate to have you in our chapter, and we hope as your career takes you into Oregon, you will always feel like you have a home with us. Thank you for all the hours you have dedicated to our chapter, growing awareness of sustainability and climate change, and advancing the profession of landscape architecture in our community and beyond.
Well, thank you, Krista. Those were very kind words indeed, and I am so happy to have been a member of the chapter for all these years. And I, even though I've just moved to Oregon, I expect to be part of the chapter as I move on. So don't, I won't forget, and don't forget about me. But thank you, and I'm very happy to be here today to share some thoughts and ideas. And I want to spark a conversation, what is meant by seventh generational thinking. And these are things I've been thinking about for a while now. So hopefully it'll be fun. If you stay till the end, we'll do Q&A, as Krista said. And also I have a fun surprise video at the very end to share with you. So let's make it through, and then I'll look forward to talking with everybody as we get through the slides. So dreaming, it all starts with dreaming, and embedding seventh generational thinking is the path forward, I believe, in shaping a more equitable, healthier, and nourished world for people and the planet. The world is waiting for us to act now, to be bold, to be visionary, and to create transformative works that link our natural systems with our cultural, political, and economic demands. All of these words that you see here are part of how I do design and how I believe that just thinking about the systems and iteration and it really also encourages you to take action and to lead and to teach. So I hope that I will impart a lot of that kind of wisdom today to everybody. So when you look at the Earth from space, there is something so awe-inspiring in how this blue sphere, the Earth, and all the universe we know is the only planet that supports life and is our home. Humanity and nature are not separate. We must see them again as one, just as Chief Seattle's description of the web of life, that humankind is but one strand within it, that we are all connected, that we need to leave nothing but footprints. This is the type of second generational thinking that we need to bring into our lives, not just our profession, in order to fix the climate crisis and create a more regenerative and resilient world. In Carl Sagan's book, A Pale Blue Dot, he connects the dots between people and planets, saying, there's perhaps no, oh, and you have to think like you're hearing Carl Sagan when I say this. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. And in this web of life, there is so much beauty. So nature matters. From forests to deserts to oceans. Design matters in the things that we build and in the places that we live. And humanity matters. All of us in our glorious global diversity of peoples and countries, and through our unlimited, amazing experiences and cultures. But extreme weather is now our new normal. We've always named the hurricanes. I come from New Orleans, so I know that. But they're getting so much larger, so much more prolific, and so much more dangerous. And in California and many other states, this year is the hottest on record again. And we know the fires by their names, so which is kind of scary. And I think we all should be scared about these things. Our resources are being depleted at accelerating rates. In 1961, humans' impact was only 70% of the Earth's capacity to regenerate, but by the year 2000, it was 120% over capacity, and it has continued since 2000, the year 2000, to increase beyond that capacity. So we're not living within the means of the resources. And primarily, we have a carbon problem, right? It's rising carbon is equals to rising temperatures. We actually have to, as of today, we have to remove 10 gigatons a year, roughly equivalent to 150 Hoover dams, to keep the temperatures from rising anymore. And our goal is 1.5 Celsius. There's a wonderful book called Drawdown. It's edited by Paul Hawken. It was published in 2017, and it has the 100 most substantive solutions to reverse global warming. I highly recommend the book, and he even has a new book of how we can do this in one generation. So speaking of 7 generations. But here's the challenge. Simply put, the diagram on the left of your screen is our carbon sources and outputs into the atmosphere. And the one on the right is our natural carbon sinks, so the oceans and the coastal areas and our land masses. But there is a 59% gap between what we are outputting and what we are able to sink. So in order to fill this 59%, there's 3 things we must do. We must reduce the sources and bring emissions to zero. We hear a lot about, we have to get to net zero. And we also need to support the sinks, uplifting nature's carbon cycle. And then lastly, we must improve society, fostering equity for all. And again, this comes into how we think about it, our mindset. We must work together. We must think about the future to get there. So, we need to get to work, right? This website, if you're not familiar with it, globalcitizen.org, is a great place to educate yourself on all the most pressing issues facing humanity. And I begin to talk about humanity because, it's people, it's us who are feeling the brunt of these things. Nature will eventually heal herself at some point because she's resilient, but we are going to impact how we live, how we breathe, and so forth. So we need to understand how we're impacting ourselves. So as I said when I began our conversation, the world's waiting for us to act now. And if you've been paying attention to the news, catharsis or not, we're moving forward together. COP26 has 2 more days. It's been a really interesting if you're following it. So far, there's 10 climate commitments that look to be sort of the big ones. And I've highlighted the 4 that I thought were the most important from our perspective here in the United States in terms of how we think about it. But the big message was we are improving, but we're nowhere near where we need to be to make the difference in the time that we have to do it. Scientists say we have 10 years, right? And so, those 2030 commitments are starting to stretch to 2035. And what is coming out of the conference is that they're saying that they, rather than meet every 5 years, they'll meet every year, so that we can kind of push the bar up and do the ticks up, more like a competition, if you will. But the meaningful change is narrowing, and we need to really jump in, all in. The clock is ticking. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means to me personally, because that was the big picture, and I see design as positive outcomes for people and planet, and I think that's where 7th generational thinking is really geared around. And it's really about rethinking how we design with nature rather than against, which is a very common idea for landscape architects. But how do we do it better? How do we really embed it into everything that we do? And as I said, nature's resilient, but humans not so much if we do not prepare and adapt into this kind of 7th generational mindset and thinking about everything we do in a more meaningful way. So I look at 7th generational thinking this way. Is the indigenous mindset of I have obligations, right? Which means that we're born with certain rights, but we're obligated to serve the past, present, and future generations. So 7 generations, you can think of it before you and after you, or you can think of it in the middle. No matter what, it's always thinking about the generations who came behind you and the ones who are coming ahead of you. And the Western mindset is more of I have rights, which is very much focusing on yourself, right? So really the difference is to understand, yes, we have rights, but we have obligations that matter to our civilization. And so that's where I think the thinking comes in, because the Western world is really about short-term thinking, and that's where the focusing on yourself is kind of focused on short-term solutions. We need long-term ones. For me, my story begins in New Orleans, because where we come from adds to how we see the world. Mine from New Orleans is a melting pot of history and the then and the now. You see that just with this picture. Very atmospheric place to grow up. Lots of great music. Lots of great food. You see some food here. Places add to our story. So whether we come from them, whether you visit them and so forth, whether you read about them, I think it all matters. And it matters that we understand other cultures, so that we understand people's beliefs and so forth, and what's happening in the world. So for me in New Orleans, it started with Cajun food like beignets and crawfish and gumbo from my dad's side, and also the New England food from my mother's side, because she was from Boston. I went to LSU for my landscape architecture degree, and that sort of pushed me into the profession. I was just so excited when I was asked to speak at the very first Green Build, which was in Austin, Texas in 2002, about the Sustainable Sites Initiative that hadn't been born yet, but we wanted it to happen. And I got to meet one of my heroes, David Suzuki, who is a naturalist and environmentalist, and just really spoke to what we have to do, why we're doing green work, and I spoke to why LEED had to include more about the site. So that was the first time we started that conversation. It then happened over years. It took about 10 years before the Sustainable Sites Initiative was launched. And then back in 2009, the recession, I was really concentrating on edibles and urban agriculture. And I wrote a book called Designing Urban Agriculture. And then more recently, being in California, was very much on top of the environmental movements and became one of Al Gore's climate reality leaders. And currently, right now, I'm on ASLA's National Climate Action Committee. So this has been sort of the arc. A conversation about just place has always been part of my life. And in a more meaningful way now, it's really about the world and where are we going and this place and this planet we call home. And throughout my life, and hopefully throughout yours, both personal and professional, books and libraries they're heaven to me. This, like, if I this picture, I'm just dying. I want to be there, right? Um, I typically have about 5 books in progress on my Kindle or hardcover or periodicals that I've tagged, whatever different magazines like the New York Times and the New Yorker and so forth. But lifelong learning and curiosity are very important skills to cultivate yourself, and we need it now. We even have sort of research and development embedded into the work we do so that we're learning on things and we come up with projects. Some we even make up through our research because we're interested in that and passionate about that issue, and then try to develop it into projects because we know more about it. And for me, back in LSU, it really started this whole design with nature. The book on the left, Design with Nature, I have that old paperback book from Ian McHarg. I think it was launched in 1969. And they had a 25th anniversary one. And now just 2019 was the 50th anniversary, 50 years later, Design with Nature Now. And it's just as relevant today as it was when I picked it up back in college. It's very important. And so what it did throughout my life, it really had me think of design as a good design is that it was nature and science and art and community, sort of this fusion of things. And throughout this past couple of years, we've really looked at it as design matters, nature matters, and humanity matters. And I think this Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, it's a drawing that illustrates the divine connection between the human form and the universe. Um, and and it's one of the most famous images in the world. And I've considered this sort of the basis of how I approach design as a balance between man and nature. And that has kind of pushed us in terms of our design thinking and our work throughout the years. And it's gotten even more so, I would say, in this last decade. A good example of how thinking and acting and working on things creates work for us. This is 38 Dolores in San Francisco. This was got to be a sites pilot project because I was involved with the Sustainable Sites Initiative. I really wanted to have a project that would be a pilot project. And I pitched it to the clients, the developers, and said, and I have to say, I mean, this project had Bill McDonough and partners as the design lead for the architecture. So they were already very committed to a more sustainable building. And so I pitched this to them and they said, okay. And of course, we did it more on our R&D time than what our fees, our fees were not really, could not attempt to pay for all of the research we had to do in learning about this. And even though I knew about it, it was still a lot of learning. But it was a really important project that really launched the depth of how we think about ecology and sustainability in our projects that followed. And this was a good example where it's about systems thinking. We work with the architects, the MEPs, and so forth to think about how all the systems in the buildings connected indoor and out. So from the rainwater harvesting to the daylighting of the windows and the air and the natural ventilation. And it was very much a team effort. So these sustainable strategies do matter. I think it helps to bring these questions up because sometimes it's less the developer and more the team. And there's so many things we can do on the sidelines, behind the scenes, as well as in front of the scenes with the clients. And then another project that wasn't never a paid project. I would say it was more of comes from volunteering with our daughter's school. And this was the Miller Creek Middle School Edible Garden. My daughter actually did do the pitch for it at her school to the principals and so forth, raised $30,000. And then we helped build it with parents and contractors and volunteers throughout. But it really became a focus in my book as well and pushed us into, by having this project, it became part of our portfolio. And we were able to talk about habitat and pollinators and food choices. And it actually, was one of the things that led me to writing my book. So you never know where things like this are going to lead you. And the food landscape, our health is also part of the climate crisis in terms of how we can feed people, in the world, because climate is affecting it. And what that has translated into our work is we're always looking for ways to include food forests or edibles into a landscape to get people engaged in the smells and nature and harvesting and foraging and looking at the environmental sensitivity and the carbon footprints of things. So we try to embed that into all our work. And really what it's come down to as a philosophy is designers change agent, designing for integration. We see that this is the most important part of being a designer, is that we can do more by speaking up, by learning about things to speak up about, and really about integrating those things in such a way that we try to inspire everybody to come along with us. I think that's very important, that we play a more public role in the future to lead all these initiatives, because the world needs us, actually, because we understand the connections between nature and people. So on a professional side, I see this as regenerative design, and how we rethink our urban systems as ecological systems. So it really is about systems thinking and ecological design. And I've come away from, the sustainability has become sort of doing less bad. It doesn't always think about doing the most good. And I think the word regenerative really pushes about being into some more positive social environmental impacts, because it seeks not merely to lessen the harm of new development, but to put design and construction to work as positive forces that can repair natural and human systems. And that's the importance of thinking about the future and the future generations. The word comes from the Latin regenerare, and it's re is again, and generate is capable of producing. So it means to bring forth again, right? And so I think that's a really good word to switch to as we think about the future, because it speaks to healing and fixing systems and so forth. A system is no more than, a network, right? It's a different lens that we can understand the complexity of the world, and there's many different kinds of systems. So understanding those in terms of what you're doing, what is the watershed system, what is the food system, and so forth, I think is an important part of the processes and the thinking through and the problem solving that we need to incorporate into our work. Because, nature teaches us that everything in the world is connected to other things. And so that is connectivity. That is what we need to be working on. A really great tool. I don't know how many of you have looked at the Climate Positive Design website and the design challenge. We now do every project. We actually are signing it up for it and looking at our carbon footprints. It goes into the, how much is sequestered, how much, what material is better than others. And we talk it through with our clients about their choices, especially if the vision and their goals is to be as sustainable as they can. And I have found that, if you're not doing it, do it, please. I mean, it's easy, it's not hard, it's a good way to educate yourself, and it's a great tool to talk to others about in a more scientific, factual way, right? So why this material is better than the other. For me, with urban farming, I've looked at a lot of carbon farming projects, which are showing how best to sequester the carbon in the soils. There are different ways that make it even bigger. And I think the Sustainable Sites Initiative is now working on a credit that is about carbon footprinting and understanding that. I also find that movies, man, I love films, and I love good documentaries. Kiss the Ground came out last year. It's if you ever thought that soil could be like fun and interesting, this is your movie. It really takes the subject into a way that just makes you fall in love with the soil and what we can do and so forth. So I highly recommend that one as well. And I'm just going to highlight a few things, but building healthy soils, not using pesticides and all that stuff, and understanding mycorrhizae and root biomass is a really important part to how we can make soils sequester better and stronger and more. And we create a thriving universe. Trees actually talk to each other, right? When the roots can connect. So it really is a village of connections throughout nature. So soil, understanding more about it is a good goal. And then water systems that perform, especially out here in the drought states, how do we rethink this problem? It's not just bioswales anymore, obviously. And so how can we restore watersheds? There's not, because of the drought, we're going to have a big difficulty because there's the ground shrinking. How do we use the right amounts? Can we design more natural solutions in place of the pipe ones? So good questions. And then, of course, pollinators and enhancing biodiversity. There's no reason that we all can't be thinking about this in every single planting plan we do. So how do we talk about it in terms of design and the environment? And, resilient communities really depend on biodiversity. And these are just a few ways of the 100 solutions in the drawdown book that I think affect landscape architects. So number 11 is regenerative agriculture. If you're working with farms and farm conservation, that's good to know. 15 was afforestation. 54 is walkable cities, how we do that well, right? Green roofs is 73, 10 rooftop solar, 51 perennial biomass. These are all things that landscape architects can kind of embed into their work to know that they are trying to deal with drawing down and helping reduce all of, create more ways to sequester our carbon. It's very important. So now I'm going to just highlight 3 projects, talk about each of these from a different perspective, and so give you a glimpse of how we've done our work. One is our net zero plus, I call it net zero plus climate. And this was how we refocus systems to promote clean tech and stewardship of nature. So it was a project called VF Outdoor Campus out in Alameda, California. And it really focused on promoting habitat, health and energy, health and then clean energy or an off the grid response. And we were able to educate as well. It's VF Outdoors, a visionary company that believed in creating a workplace that as a sustainable lifestyle environment, promoted environmental stewardship among its employees, and it gives back to the community. So North Face, Lucy, it's all of those companies. And so we were able to kind of help them realize that vision in their campus. They also, because of our edible gardens, they did donations to local food banks and charitable organizations. They had a green team that actually helped take care of the edible garden. And they also had a cafeteria that was able to use the ingredients from the garden to the employees' benefit. But eco-literacy and building community were at the heart of this program. So it's about 15 acres, and you can see all the words and language from owls and raptors to salad garden, solar farm. We really kind of took a agrarian view of this to come up with a design. And, we had the butterfly garden, and it really was sort of about, being as, we used the word sustainable in this one. This was back in, I want to say in the mid 2000s. But in the end, it became a LEED Platinum project. And it was one of the highest Bay Friendly rated projects. And if you're from California, you know what Bay Friendly is. And we were able to get these both do the whole programs for both of these rating systems. And it's still a beautiful and lovely campus today. They do testing of their tents out on the lawn. They've just moved to Colorado though. So I've talked with the latest group that's moving in here, and it's a healthcare organization. And we're hoping to kind of continue and help them realize how to keep what we did for VF as part of their own culture. So that's next. Another one is a sea level and climate. And this is where we're advancing climate adaptive solutions that address sea level rise and promote resilience. So if you're in the Bay Area, that is a topic that is, is high on our list of any projects that we're doing that are near waterways and especially the coast, right? So this project is at the Alameda waterfront at the former Naval Air Station. And so what you see right there, the star is where the first phase of our park is, and it goes screen left to along that what's called Seaplane Lagoon. And that is the whole base kind of above it and to the let's call it to the left, which is to the west. So we're facing west. And we of course had to work with BCDC and understand, because Alameda is an island, you know, so it's really impacted by sea level rise, and really had to understand the language of SLR and be able to know what it meant to be 24 inches above it, or 66 inches, and what it all meant. And so we did a lot of studies and strategies to even talk to the public. So as we learned, we created documents that could reach out to the stakeholders and even to the city and even to BCDC and all the agencies we had to talk to as we came up with our design and tried to understand, you know, what was the most innovative way forward. And for us, the park is the one that has the more hard lines for the first phase. It's the more urban part of the park. It's kind of where our first 68 acre project kind of culminates in terms of the density as well as the beginning of the park. And then as it went west, it was becoming more natural and about floodable wetlands and so forth. So with sea level rise being uncertain in the way that exactly what year is going to trigger what, it was really important to select appropriate resiliency strategies to meet the community goals and to meet the codes and the agency requirements. So we actually designed for 4 options for the whole waterfront park. It was designing for inundation, seawall, the areas where seawall might be necessary, levee, and the floodable wetlands. So that was kind of part of how we looked at the master planning and the future phases for the master plan phase. And a good example of the designing for inundation, our terraces at the park were designed so that storm events, we actually wouldn't have to do a levee or raise the waterfront area for a long time, because we've designed all of these plant habitats with the sea level rise inundations and the storm inundations so that they would be resilient and survive. And we looked at not just the plant materials, but a lot of the wildlife and like the California least tern and so forth. So to make sure that we had enough biodiversity for flora and fauna, and we could withstand the storms as they came, but also designed to how people would use it, like right after storm and so forth. So the different levels allow people to still get down, you know, when the storm is over. So it was that. This is what it looked like a few years ago. It still looks like this in areas that we haven't started building the park, but the park is under construction, and we hope to have it open by the end of December this year or 1st of January. But it's like runways. You know, this was built in World War II out here, and it has a history before that. But it's a lot of concrete. But wow, what amazing views, and what a place to be on the bay and experience the beauty of our bay, you know, in the Bay Area. And this was sort of our vision of how it would look, incorporating some of the history, that great view of San Francisco as you face west, but also a park that allowed for bicycles, allowed for lots of people, allowed for picnicking and gathering, dealt with urban heat island with trees and structures and so forth. So thinking about all of those things and how we could create a park that also was a resilient one, and could potentially also educate at a few points in time on that to bring awareness to the public. And this is kind of a shot from the drones from about 2 weeks ago. I was just down there looking at the project to basically all the planting is in, and now we still have to finish a little hardscape and site furnishings and some lighting. So, but we're getting close. But you can see San Francisco in the distance. It's such an amazing, you come down this main road into this community, and then into the park on this access that is just incredible that everybody honored in from the master plan and on forward. So we're really, really excited about this. And everything is starting to really, look like it's going to thrive. The plants have been being done over the last, I would say, 4 months. Some areas were planted about 4 months ago, and some just more recently, the past month. But using recycled materials and the gabion walls and so forth, and trying to integrate stormwater management as well as this resilient um, habitat and biodiversity plant palette. I've even had contractors in this project say, "Hey, I'm copying your plant list, and I'm going to take it home to my house because I think these plants are amazing." And it's a lot of natives and so forth. So it's a pretty exciting project that even we feel like we're reaching out to people about the topic in ways that we weren't expecting, right? Don't often have contractors just come and say to me like, "Hey, I love that plant." So another couple of images of that. We have a huge sculpture going in, public art. And then you can see in the distance, we have these stripes that are about the history of the place on this runway promenade, trying to talk about the history of the base and so forth. There's, we want to still honor some of that history as well because it was an important place. And you can see a lot of the large aircraft carriers and stuff in the distance across the other side of the lagoon. So amazing space, amazing project. We're very excited about that. So, and it really does work with sea level rise in one of the best ways we thought we could do. And we worked with the city and BCDC for what the future outcomes will be and what are the strategies in different years that will trigger certain things being done and modified. And then the last one is about what I'm calling food and climate. Obviously, urban agriculture is very important to me. And I think we have to refocus climate resiliency also on food landscapes. There's a lot of underserved people and areas that are not served with good food and organic food and we need better health for people. So and we want to draw down the greenhouse gases. This one really focused on the greenhouse gases and addressing hunger and promoting resilience. This is called the Center for Food and Agriculture. It's located in Marin County at the Marin County Civic Center campus. We're working with the Agriculture Institute of Marin. They are the ones that run 7 farmers markets in the Bay Area. And their motto is bringing food, farm, and communities forward. They actually have a lot of programs that feed people as well as providing healthy, nourishing food for the underserved populations in an affordable cost. And their value is really about building a food system that's equitable by supporting the mid-sized farmers and family businesses and underrepresented communities. And what I really loved about Andy, who is their director, was a quote he said in the very beginning, "Making the world a better place, one bite at a time." That really galvanized our team to really think about this. We even entered the Rockefeller food challenge that happened a few years ago, but we didn't get selected. But it's that kind of team, that kind of like let's do the best we can. We started with a vision boards and a stakeholder workshop process and looking at all the different things from both buildings to landscapes to eco materials and so forth, and really kind of work with the stakeholders, one for education and also for listening and understanding the values. As the board had a series of goals already, which you see on screen left, but we went through a North Star visioning process with the help of the McLennan Design Group as well. And if you know Jason McLennan, another really good inspirational person, he started the Living Building Challenge, and he's now trying to get off the Living Food Challenge. So we brought that into the conversation of how do we use regenerative design for this project, because regenerative agriculture is the way to go. And you can see how these emerging visions became more complex on the right in terms of finding out that North Star. And we did that in workshop 1 so that we really had everybody invested in what this vision is as we did before we really did the design. The design is really about having a farmer's market area, which is basically, if you think about it, most of them are in parking lots and so forth, but also having the Center for Food and Agriculture in where we could have a permanent space and learning gardens and so forth, and connect to the smart train, and then have the farmers market is on 3 days a week, but the areas also has to serve the civic center and the county for parking for events on 4 days of the week. So how do we create, I mean, obviously the county was one of our stakeholders. So working with them on what that meant and how we can just regenerate and uh, invigorate this area. We also the county was part of the drawdown. Marin has a drawdown called Marin Drawdown. And with all the work that we did, we were able to become endorsed by Marin Drawdown as one of their future case studies to be watching for, which will help us get some funding, I think, for some of our more innovative stuff. This is the area which has the building and the learning gardens. And when you see on the right, there's the day the parking lot is used for the tents and the market, and where we have spillover events and so forth. So that just kind of gives you an idea of this, what part of the 4-acre site is. And we, of course, we're dealing with sea level rise and all those things because we actually are part of a creek that comes nearby that has tidal inundation. So what we were able to do with the drawdown and looking at our climate positive design footprints, we came up and tested a bunch of different materials and so forth to see how we could get to, I think the goal in climate positive design is like 5 years minimum, and then 15 years. They want projects to get between 5 and 15 years. Well, we found that by going to that North Star vision of what we could do and reducing the hardscape and only using eco-sensitive materials, we could get to 2 years to positive. And this has been very, very much a key story in looking for the funding stakeholders as we move forward for branding and so forth for support. We showed how if you use concrete in lieu of the eco concrete, you were 30 years to positive, before you could sequester enough carbon, and asphalt was like 22. And so those stories and us using the Pathfinder tool in climate positive design really helped us to showcase what those selections meant to their ability to meet their vision and their goals, and also to drive the regenerative stakeholder investment into the design, and for Marin County to have this great place to use as a a gold star kind of place of showcasing that you can do this. So that was very important. This is a good example of looking at the materials. You see the little red dots are really about, we had to assign it as we did square footages and stuff of what we were using, and then we ended up not using some of them because they didn't seem to work. So this was taking a vision board and then putting it through the carbon calculator and figuring out what would work. And now we're in the branding, fundraising, and entitlements of really that whole farm to table, outdoor learning, having an outdoor kitchen and so forth. So it's very exciting. This is one of the events that just happened last Saturday at Stemple Creek, one of the farmers that is in the farmers market. And so very, very exciting project. I think it'll really go a long way towards the talking about the conversation of sustainability but really regenerative design. Even they too had a big concern of using the word at first, but now all the farmers are using regenerative rather than sustainability. So it's been an interesting couple of years with the pandemic in there too. Our last workshop was done during the pandemic, so lots of pivots and so forth. But it's been an exciting and rewarding project. So I'm going to end here with a few last slides just to, how do we act now? And how do we refocus it in our daily work and our design work? So I'm just going to leave you with a few little tidbits before I show you the movie. Next week, we're going to launch the Climate Advocacy Guide at ASLA National at the Conference for Landscape Architecture. And the purpose of this guide is to help professionals become better climate advocates, both individually as well as through your firms or public institutions and so forth. because climate action starts with making individual commitments, and you have a large sphere of influence as a professional. You can take action through your workplace, at your child's school, at your local town hall or city council meeting, and even with nonprofit organizations and at state and federal levels. It's broken down into 4 major goals, the whole guide. And the main 4 are the drawing down the greenhouse gases and building in resiliency faster. 2 is advancing climate justice. 3 is how do we persuade and amplify through our work. And for those people who are more interested in policy, how do you shape local, state, and federal policies? And so it's not exhaustive, but it's a menu of approaches that landscape architects will be encouraged to take to increase our positive impact on the climate and understand how to even talk about it and where to talk about it and so forth. So I'm very excited to have this come out next week. So you'll look for some ASLA news about this. And then another thing is find organizations you admire and follow them. These are 2 that I follow, the Columbia Climate School, and they were at COP26 and posting updates. So I learned about different things because of their newsletter. And then I also follow one called Food Tank, which is also all about transforming the food system. So Danielle, who leads this group, was there, and so really got to follow in on the issues and hone in. So you're not looking at every single issue out there, but the ones that you're trying to track and you personally care about, because that's where you're going to do more. So, and so really we need to think about how do we reshift the paradigm from conservation to regeneration, right? To say the world needs us to act boldly now. So last but not least, I'll end with a David Suzuki quote about how the human brain holds the key to our future. We have to recall that image of the planet from outer space that I showed you in the pale blue dot, a single entity in which air, water, and continents are interconnected, because that's our home. And I am going to start this video. We're only going to play a few minutes because it's long, but if you go to Symphony of Science, and we are all connected, you can find it. I think Chris is going to put it in the chat box, but it's a website that combines science with music to make it more interesting and really kind of just get to the essence of what this conversation is. So without further ado, here is the video.
We're all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically.
I think nature's imagination is so much greater than man's. He's never gonna let us relax, 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 relax.
We live in an in-between universe where things change alright, but according to patterns, rules, or as we call them, laws of nature.
I'm this guy standing on a planet. Really, I'm just a speck. I'm just a speck compared with a star. The planet is just another speck. To think about all of this, to think about the vast emptiness of space. There's billions and billions of stars, billions and billions of specks.
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together. The cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
Across the sea of space, the stars are others. We've traveled this way before, and there is much to be learned.
We're all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically.
I find it elevating and exhilarating to discover that we live in a universe which permits the evolution of molecular machines as intricate and subtle as we.
I know that the molecules in my body are traceable to phenomena in the cosmos. That makes me want to grab people in the street and say, have you heard this?
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together. The cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
Okay, so we're here, and I think I left you 5 minutes to talk to me, but sorry about that. But hopefully you like that little music interlude. So I did.
Well, thank you, April, for that talk. That was so inspiring to see you reach out to so many different groups and to expand your practice, making your practice so much richer that way. I wanted to open up this conversation to the audience. If anybody has any questions, now would be the time to ask. You can just raise your hands or type into the chat. While everybody gets their thoughts together, I do have a question. I'm wondering, I think a lot of our membership are fairly young and probably thinking, how do I, as a young person just entering the profession, advocate for these things that matter to us and not just be told to just make it, fluff it up with some shrubs? How do you have a voice within the practice, or do you just try to do it outside of practice, by joining organizations?
Well, I think joining organizations is obviously a good thing to do, because at least that immediately will get you some more feedback, and you can be with people who get the message and might have energy to do things. I think as a young, I think back to, when I did the edible garden, for example. I wasn't just out of school, but I had a young kid, and just thinking about, what are the things that we can do to help from a community volunteer point of view. It could be also getting involved with like ACE mentor programs, which also are a group of professionals who are trying to teach high schoolers and so forth to do things, and then to just kind of find something on your own and play with it, and then present it to your firm, like, hey, I have this idea, and see if there's other like-minded people in your firm that might be able to talk about it. A lot of firms do have pinup space where, hey, you can volunteer and talk about the subject. I think the biggest thing is speak up, right? I remember back in the day when I was first at EDA, and I thought, man, why aren't designers getting to go on all these projects all around the world? And how do we design places we can't see? So I started by, I gave one of those little cameras, the portable cameras that are instant, I gave it to the principal and said, hey, here's all the places, and I marked it on a little 8.5 by 11. I want you to take pictures of these places here on the site, because he was going every 6 weeks and we never did. So did that. He came back, and guess what? 6 weeks later, I went to a project because he said, okay, you guys have to go. And he started adding us to the team as people who needed to see the site, right? So sometimes it's just little things, thinking outside the box, that can really slowly change, an organization's thinking of how you might do it. So don't be afraid, right? Just don't do it in a mean way, right? I was sort of like, okay, hey, Howard, here, could you please take us some pictures, because the team really needs to see these things. And Google Earth did not exist at the time, so I might say that we were, it was critical thinking from our part that we really need to go there, but it worked, and then I got to go to all the different places we were doing a couple of times a year, so I got to see the world also because of it.
Thank you for that. I think Colette raised her hand. Go ahead, Colette.
Hey, thank you, April, for this inspiring presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask, I know we don't have too much time, so I'll make it quick. I'm a big fan of the edible landscapes as well. And I was wondering if you have any advice on maintaining those landscapes over time. I remember you mentioned making maintenance guides. Do you try and design the edible landscapes to be low maintenance and self-sustaining?
Yeah, I think the critical thing is having the school principal invested, number one. because that's going to encourage the teachers to bring their students out to it, especially science teachers, and then to, that then encourages the parents. What we were able to find, though, is that unless there is a champion parent, who's kind of organizing when you're gone, we had to think about how we transitioned, and we were able to get someone when we left and had to move on, and it worked for that, but that person may not have had as much ability to kind of, do it themselves. But I think the principal did help, but then the principal left. So it is a constant community type of thing, message boards, students, and trying to give enough information so that the school has to be the champion, right? More, and get the parents involved, I think. So that was kind of the way we did it. And it's funny, it's had years, this was 2009, it's had years where it looks like it's not as well cared for, and then it, goes back another 2 or 3 years and it looks great. So I think the important thing for us is we saw there's resilience there if you design it right and create the framework for it. And so, it can happen. It's just that it's constantly shifting and changing, and you kind of have to learn to be okay with it to some extent. But we were in that neighborhood for about 20 years, so I could also have a call every now and then. And I think that's important too, is if you have projects, go back and see them, visit them, learn from them. Sometimes you see, oh gosh, I'm not going to use that plant again, or why did I not think about the sun orientation as much as you should? It's really incredible the things that we learn just by going back and doing revisits. So with edibles, it's tough though, because I try to convince my clients in the bigger projects that they need to either tie in with a local community garden group that they can get volunteers from that to help, or they also, if there's enough projects I've done with them, hey, just hire a coordinator, who can do 2 hours a week to keep it going. So it really is a part of the conversation before you're done with the project. I think, though, that's what's important, so you can build in a structure to keep it going at least for a while, and then hopefully forever, as long as people are there and the school's there. So you be creative, right?
Those are good tips. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm unfortunately going to have to close out this talk as we're out of time. But just quickly, I wanted to ask, for those of us who won't be making it to the conference, how is there any way for people to access the climate advocacy guide that you're working on?
Yes. It's going to go live. There will be, I think it'll be in the dirt, or in all of the different newses that ASLA puts out there. We're presenting it to the CPC, the Chapter Presidents Council, and our message to the chapter presidents is call on us. We can help even explain it and walk you through it this year. That'll be our goal. We spent a whole year doing this guide. It's very deep. It's got lots of information. But there'll be a link sent to everybody. They're also fixing the website a little bit this year, making the whole climate part a lot more streamlined. So that'll happen next week as well. So I'm actually looking at the final draft of the graphics for the advocacy guide tomorrow, because they're going to launch it on Monday or Tuesday. But I would say chapter wise, we're looking for the chapters to embrace it, have sort of maybe a person on your directors or your board, be the person who helps people, use the advocacy guide. So I think that's our goal. But like I said, it's going to have resources, tips for any of the different big four that I talked about in terms of what you can do individually, how you might transform your own firm. Like that was a good question about how do younger folks, talk to the firms and change the culture a little bit. It's sometimes it's a whole hard slog, but in the end, you'll probably find you'll find a firm that it's not a hard slog and they do it. So look for that. Ask questions when you interview too, and see. And more I'm finding people do care, about making positive in the world, not just making money. And I think that's the thing. It's great to make money, don't get me wrong, but take at least one project a year if that's all you can do, and really do it. Learn on your own. I mean, like I said, the Pathfinder 2 climate positive design, just take one of your projects and put it through that, and then then maybe go talk to someone and say, hey, look, this is we're 50 years to positive. If we just change this and this, next time, and use these materials for that, our projects could be more sustainable and more carbon savvy and so forth, because I think more and more of the firms will have to change. It's just, it's always what do you call it, a bell curve, right? And you're always looking for the people. I'm always looking for the clients already on the other side of the bell curve who want to do it. And I'm never, now I don't have to take the people who I just have to pull up the hill. I take them on the top part who are coming down and they get it. And then we do a lot of sustainability stealth, I would say. There's so many things you could do in a project to make it more regenerative without having to change their mind about anything. It's just good policy, right? And good practice. So make it part of your best management practices. We've started I think for the last 15 years, all of our projects have to follow Bay friendly practices and the principles, the 7 principles. No matter what, the client doesn't know or have to know, it's just that's what we do, right? And you can do that. You can say no pesticides allowed in your specifications. So I think it's really taking the initiative is probably the thing I learned when I went off on my own 20 plus years ago, probably 30 years ago. But taking initiative can help, and being positive about it and giving it as a positive message also helps. Not like, hey, we're not doing this, but hey, what if we did this? That's a big difference in terms of how you lead. That's leading, right? Is inspiring those clients to want to do it, or inspiring your leaders at your firm to want to maybe change their walk a little bit. You're not going to get them to change overnight, but you can take a little step this way, right? And so that's what always been in my philosophy is, if you don't try, it's not going to happen. So just try and lead with positivity versus negativity.
Well, thank you again for the presentation, and also for all your work beyond your practice, just the advocacy work that you've done to make that possible for everyone else in our profession to do their job. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. And, if you'd like me to come back and talk about the advocacy guide itself at some point, just for a little Zoom meeting with anybody who's interested, I definitely would love to do that. So
that would be wonderful.
Okay. Well, everybody have a great day. And I'll see you sometime in the internet universe.
Yeah.
And those of you going to the conference, please, if you see me, say hi. Love to get to know you better. I'll see you, Laura. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much.